I reached out to you because sometime maybe this summer you replied or reposted someone on Twitter saying Against Me is somehow still more important and influential than they get credit for, which like in a way that you're pretty good at in terms of using social media, I'd say that synthesizes kind of like an idea I had, which is okay, now I'm going to make fucking a 9 episode podcast series, all an hour each, to try and get at that. But that synthesizes like it feels very real to me. It's like that no one's going to say that they're unimportant. They are
Right.
important, and yet, can you elaborate on your like potent 12-word tweet there?
I think that no genre of music is as out of fashion right now as folk punk. People like Jeff Rosenstock, his continued popularity and success, by all accounts, because he seems like a fucking great guy who
Yeah,
works really hard and makes great songs. But his continued relevance, especially with like Zoomers and younger music fans, means that people keep rediscovering Bomb the music industry, and he still incorporates a lot of ska elements in his music. Jer from Ska Tune Network has done a lot of viral videos doing ska covers of things. So previously maligned genres when I was growing up, stuff like ska, and then emo, post the emo revival era where it was still very niche. When bands like Marietta and Snowing and Glocamora, when it was happening, it was still very niche. It was still kind of nerd music a little bit, or
yeah,
a little bit outside of even what alternative music and popular music was. It wasn't something that was going to get covered on Pitchfork or anything like that. And now you see that era of emo, in addition to earlier stuff being revisited, stuff like Jimmy World and Sunny Day Real Estate and Mineral now being considered like
yep.
major classics, when before they were considered maybe just not as hard hitting or as serious as other genres. Um, and kids love it. Always
It's
kids love emo, but it's really taken off this current couple years on social media.
I like to tell my friend Brooke that actually the band Algernon Cadwallader they didn't actually exist. Like that didn't happen at that time. They exist now to talk about how great they were then.
They were very beloved at the end of their run, but
Yeah,
they were doing very independent things, very DIY things. They were playing the videos you see, they're great. They're full rooms, but they're basements. They
yeah, yeah.
are decidedly they weren't like selling out big rooms. But as these other genres have sort of like kind of just gained a little bit more respect and found audiences and kids going, well, it's not really important to what the critical reception of this was. I really enjoy this. And now you see like the Hotelier and Foxing going on tour and selling out big rooms for albums that were at the time respected by a few, but not
Yeah.
really considered by the rest of music media. One of the things that has just absolutely not had a resurgence like that is folk punk.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reasons for it. I think one, it's insanely sincere. It's like deeply corny in its kind of ties to like straightforward, like anarchist political messaging,
Yeah.
which is both not corny in its essence, but oftentimes the messaging is so blunt and um, kind of flag waving. I think that it kind of turns kids off because it's not subtle, it's not
Yeah.
nuanced,
Yeah.
it's very brash, and it wasn't about really the quality of the instrumental performance or the vocal performance as much as it was about being kind of loud and
It's yeah.
fast and urgent.
It's often deliberately grating on purpose. Like it wants to annoy you at least a half some of the times when I hear it. And I'm inclined toward a lot of folk punk music. Sometimes I'm like, half the point here seems like you want it to sound bad. But
Yeah, there's an inherent abrasiveness to it, and it was also just like the type of music that there's a lot of bad versions of, because the template of like cowboy chords and chuggy
yep.
strumming and kind of the gruff beardy orgcore shouted vocal thing, it was so easy to imitate that there quickly became just like so many
That's a good
flat,
call.
uninteresting versions of it. So it's really hard, I think, to go back and get into it in hindsight, because there's not really a roadmap for like what the classics are, what you're supposed to find, because it doesn't have that kind of canonization or like history to it. And you can find people who can tell you about it and who have a lot of interesting things to say about it, but it truly doesn't exist in the kind of canonized way a lot of other genres do. And so you'll still see kids get into bands like Defiance Ohio or Spoon Boy or like really great stuff, but I understand why
Yeah.
something as kind of unsubtle and fist in the air is not resonating with kids who live in a kind of more complex and depressing reality in some ways.
It's a good point. Well, now I'm gonna have my eye out to see if someone can do it, if it can be up next for folk punk music. But a thing to add to that though is that, and it's evidenced by what happened with Against Me when they were one of those bands doing that in Florida. They felt bigger than that at every time. They're just getting plucked out of whatever phase they were in, out of like, this is just irresistible. This is just, yeah, it's yelling and it's like clearly there was just something there. Even these like A&R guys and stuff like that we've read about and heard about a ton in the recent years, I think they just liked it. They're just like, this is just fucking good.
Yeah, in many ways, that was Against Me's big problem early on as a band. Over the kind of that middle period of their career was that they were constantly getting plucked out of their pond and placed somewhere bigger. And that was kind of alienating to both sides of their audience. They were struggling
Yeah.
to meet the expectations of like label and A&R people who really thought that they could kind of polish this and get sort of like an offspring out of them or something like that. Or like, there's these West Coast kind of punk and pop punk bands that were just huge commercial successes. And I think that there was this idea that you could take this band from Gainesville and expose them to a larger audience. And then maybe that could happen because they had obviously the ability to write hooks and write choruses,
Yeah.
and that set them apart from a lot of their peers. But every time they got kind of pulled up to the next tier, their existing fan base was super hostile.
I think this album is an interesting juncture along that journey. And so let's go there. I got an animal doing something at my door real quick. I'll let him. You can have it all. I got the heart to fight no. Total exhaustion, complete breath.